Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the latest Locum webinar. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining tonight. It's really great that you can take time out of your busy schedule to join us to chat about some industry news and get into the core of the subject, which is, can data help solve the pharmacy workforce crisis? Just to set a bit of context, I'm Stevie McIntyre. I'm the head of marketing here at Locum. I'm joined by Tom Evans, who's in the marketing team here at Locum. And Tom will be moderating the webinar this evening. He will be looking out for your comments and questions and answering anything via text that you need, and also moderating whenever we go to do the Q&A at the end of the session. We want this to be as interactive as possible, so please do write questions or put comments in that we're talking about. We'd love to discuss things and have this as an open conversation rather than just a lecture that sometimes webinars tend to be. So without further ado, we'll move on to why we're doing this. So as everyone who's on this webinar most likely knows, there are many challenges in community pharmacy. Lots of those challenges are focused around the workforce. And you can see we pulled out a couple of headlines from some of the industry publications and some of the groups within the industry. So challenges around funding, there's always financial challenges within any industry, but within pharmacy, there's definitely challenges around funding, and that's got a knock-on effect to the challenges around workforce and the cost of your workforce. And you can see here at the bottom, people have warned that it's going to get worse. But hopefully this evening we're going to give you some insights to help you understand how you can use data to ease those challenges within the pharmacy market. So who are we and why are we doing this webinar? Hopefully most of you guys who are on the webinar this evening, which you can see is a few, know Locum. We help you get the right person in the right place at the right time. So we have been around since 2016. In that time, we've won a number of awards for our technology and our service. And we connect essentially locums with pharmacies across the UK. In terms of numbers, we work with over 10,000 UK pharmacies, and that's right down to small independents who've just opened, all the way up to the large multiples. So a real range of different clients who post on our marketplace. And then we work with 35,000 locum pharmacists in the UK. And what you can say here is there's 50,000 users, but that includes the pharmacy technicians, the pharmacy dispensers, the ACTs, as well as we are present in the optometry industry. So we have the largest locum pool in the UK. So we're in a good position to kind of understand the challenges that pharmacy faces. And we have a lot of data to back up these challenges. As you can see, 1.8 million shifts have been posted on our platform. I think this slide was done a few months back, so I think it's closer to 2 million now. We have 100,000 live shifts at any one time on the platform, which is obviously a huge amount right across the UK. So that's who we are, and this is what we're going to try and cover in this webinar. So we're going to look as a high level of data, why it's important, and then we're going to look at some case study examples. And what this will mean is we'll look at ways in which you can use data within your pharmacy. People talk about data, and I think organizations think, oh, that's not for us. We don't use data. We're just operating a couple of pharmacies, so why would we need data? But I think whenever you dive into what data means and what can be captured, you can then see the impact it can have if you analyze it correctly. So we're going to give some examples of how to do that, and then we're going to talk through a little bit about the latest market rate report that we've completed, which runs from April 22 to April 23, and look at just some of the different rates, the fluctuations, and what might be causing those. And then we'll look at a quick conclusion of the presentation, and go through some guidance from us about what to do next. Okay, so we'll get into it. Tom, anything you want to add to the agenda? Anything you think would be interesting?
It's just a super interesting topic, like you said. Nothing really much to add here apart from data, especially on our job, is so useful, and we just know it's really going to make a real impact getting to grips with the numbers.
Brilliant. And I'll point out that we will aim to be doing the webinar around 30 minutes because we know how valuable your time is, and especially on a Thursday evening. So we will try and keep this to 30 minutes. So if we don't get time for the questions at the end, what we'll do is you can post them and we'll pick them up separately, either by email or on the text.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to be here for any of those questions, but yeah, please drop them through.
Yeah. So the first question is, like, broadly, like, why is data so important, and who uses it and why do we use it? So data kind of provides facts, and it can be used for reference or analysis. And the important thing here is, so using something for reference is just kind of, as it says, to refer back to it. Using it for analysis usually provides further outcomes from that analysis. So you might analyze data, and then after you analyze the data, you make informed decisions. So that's kind of what we would say is a broad description of data and data analysis. So you can see here's a nice little GIF here. This actually comes from Uber. Everyone probably on this call has booked an Uber from time to time. And this GIF is explaining how Uber use data to calculate trends in taxi booking. So they use heat maps to show where the biggest demand is for taxi booking and how they can fit their supply, which is the taxi drivers, around that demand. So they share that data with the drivers, and that data is shared to make sure that whenever someone wants a taxi, it's there at a quick time for them. So it would kind of inform where a taxi driver would park in order to predict the demand that's coming up. And I know you're thinking, well, what's Uber got to do with pharmacy? But supply and demand does fall into the pharmacy market, and especially different workforces within the pharmacy market. So Uber example here is that every time you're collecting information but not using it, there's potential for an opportunity to be missed, and your business might not grow because this opportunity's been missed. So yeah, so I just thought that's an interesting one. And there's another example, again, something that everyone uses, Netflix. You might log into Netflix and you see recommended for you. And what they do in Netflix is they pull you in a cohort. They put you in a cohort, say you like comedy movies and you like sports documentaries. They will put you together in a cohort, and that defines what's suggested for you. So even on a small granular level of collecting data, it then impacts your experience as a user of the platform. So again, another example of a large business using Netflix, but we're going to kind of show you how smaller businesses can also use data. Okay, so within pharmacy, what data can be analyzed? So you could analyze store closures, number one, recruitment challenges. So how many vacant shifts do you have? You can analyze locum rates. So this could be saying, okay, I need to raise my rates in order to attract better locums. Okay, when I do services, I need to reflect the rates based on the service income, and that would all be collected, and then you can make an informed decision around that. And then fourthly, which we hear a lot, is supply and demand. So our platform can look at the demand, which is how many shifts are posted on the platform for pharmacists, and then the supply, how many locums we have in those areas that shifts are posted, and then again that can impact rates. So high demand, higher rate. So just as a case study, to get into this, so say you're a multiple and you've got multiple, even not even a large multiple, you've got multiple branches, and you're finding it difficult to attract locums, and this is again leading to store closures, and then it's got more knock-on effects, prescription loss. And I think we've identified that if a store closes, it can cost you £7,000 per day in prescription loss, in retail revenue, and then also in retention of customers, because if someone goes to your pharmacy and it happens to be closed, they're not likely to come back. So it's around £7,000 a day that if your pharmacy is closed, that could impact. So as a case study, one of our clients has looked at their internal workforce, and they've used locum heat maps, which is the supply of locums in the area, and they've analysed that. And what that does is it helps them make informed decisions about how many locums in their area, who to post the shifts to, how much rate they need to post a shift at in order to attract locums. So that could be a higher rate in order to attract locums if there's low coverage. They also can look at regular locums working across branches, so active versus inactive. So you might think, well, I should know this, but what you find is if you have multiple branches, there might be one locum who works in a branch regularly, another branch regularly, and then there might be another locum who works in a different branch and they're very inactive, but you could make them active by pulling them over to the new branch. It could be a slightly closer, it could be a bit of a more attractive branch for them to work at. So it's about analysing who you have registered to your platform or registered in your direct locum database and seeing if you can move these guys. And people think data is numbers, but often it can relate to people and their behaviors and their actions. So that's one thing that falls in there. And then again, locum rate, which is a fairly straightforward one. It's just looking at the locum rate in your area and seeing if you have to put the rate up to match that. So if you post a shift at lower than market rate, it's very unlikely to get an applicant or someone in there. And again, that would cause store closures. But if you analyze all these three things, we think that would reduce store closures. That's just a quick case study to give you an idea of data and how you can use it.
Yes, like you say, Stevie, it's numbers really do boil down to people and behavior, and it's not just a tick box exercise. Sometimes numbers, data, it's really getting to grips with people's behavior and how you can move the needle in the right direction for the behaviors you want in a way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Like people always think data is numbers, but I like to look at data like it's layered. So you have the first layer, that are the numbers, but what informs that data? Where is it coming from? Who is it coming from? So those are the questions to ask when you look at data. What's underneath this number and what feeds it? And then that can help you make changes within that, and it can change the outcome of the data or the bottom line. So that is an interesting one, Tom. I think we're very quick to kind of dismiss data for just being numbers, but actually what's feeding it.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so another case study, so an independent multiple unable to recruit full-time or permanent pharmacists, and analysing their data and their workforce, they identified that the different locums who were choosing to work across their branches on a regular basis. So this is a perfect example from what we talked about before. You might have a locum who works 4 shifts a week in different branches, but because it's different branches, you're not pairing up that they love working for your organization because you're not seeing them every day. Say you look at one branch data, you're not seeing them every day as registered to your location. You think, oh, they could be working for someone else, but actually they're working for your organization and they might be the perfect candidate to work full time. And then you can also look at the different salary ranges and the remuneration level for locums and also permanent staff. So you record this all on a platform or a system, you can pull all that out and you can say, okay, well, this salary slightly below market value, or this is the market value salary. And that means that if I post a full-time job at this salary, then I'll be more likely to attract locums. And then the ability to communicate. So effectively, if you collect data and you collect information, you can communicate more effectively. So understanding people's wants and needs whenever they're for a full-time job. Like I've used this example before in different webinars, but when the first thing I would always say to a pharmacy or to any organization who are wanting to recruit a full-time member of staff is, firstly, survey who currently works in your organization. What do they love about it? Because the things they love about it are the things that are going to attract the next employee. And what I would also say is it's not always quantitative data, which is the numbers. It's qualitative data, which is feedback. So one thing that came out from talking to a number of pharmacies is why did the employees love working in that pharmacy? And it shocked me, but salary didn't come out on top of the list of things they wanted. It was parking and accessibility of the branch. So someone valued the fact they had a parking space and they didn't have to worry or think where they were going to park before they got there, over the fact that they were getting their salary. So I just thought that was a really interesting outcome, and that was all gained from a survey sent to staff. So again, people under numbers. It's not just a data game of people. Tom, have you heard anything like that? Any insights like that?
Yeah, definitely. Surveys are brilliant. Speaking to your staff, getting their feedback. We don't talk much about employer brand in pharmacy, tend to, but this all boils down to employer brand. Like, definitely Google that term if you've never heard it before. But understanding what your top locums, the ones you love the best, kind of what they love about you, and then just applying that. Like Stevie says, they love the parking. It could be they like the management themselves. There's lots of tangible and intangible benefits for always going to someone's decision why they would work for you. We all understand the tangible, which is like pay, but there's intangible ones where perhaps they just like the working environment, parking, etc. Getting to grips with them and understanding them will really help you to attract even more people to your store and keep them coming back to you.
Yeah, brilliant, Tom. I think this case study example is that you've got the mix of data and you've got the mix of like surveying and people findings, and then the outcome here is that they're able to recruit 5 full-time pharmacists by looking at these different types of data.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Here's case study 3. So this is a very local one. So we're based in Belfast, if you didn't know, but there was a pharmacy locum unsatisfied with rates working in Northern Ireland. And analysing locum opportunities across the UK, they identified that areas to work. This is a locum facing one. So again, this goes both sides. So this locum was able to analyse areas that had the highest rates in the UK. And so they were able to look at the market rate data. They were looking to analyse areas that with guaranteed locum work. So what that meant was it was maybe a balance between good pay and guaranteed work. So they looked at places where there was lots of shifts posted in an area, so less competition from other locums. So one jumps out to me right now is, higher, less populated areas like Inverness or the Isle of Skye are places where there's not much competition, but there's high rates. So that would be something that would be pulled out. And this feeds into the stay away opportunities below. So again, this locum was from Northern Ireland, able to analyse stay away opportunities. The accommodation and travel is paid for. And what the outcome was by analysing that data was they were able to increase their take home pay. And this didn't obviously have an impact on pharmacies because they were looking for a pharmacist, and this person just migrated to where the work was based on looking at the data. And we do a study every year in January, and it looks at the highest rates in the UK, and you can see it's the less populated areas. So if locums can see this information, they can change their booking habits. Okay, and then this is the final case study, and I'm conscious we've been on for 20 minutes already, and so I'm going to fly through the next couple of slides, and hopefully we'll have time for some Q&A. So the workforce supply and demand, there's a term called supply and demand economics, and Tom, you've heard of that one, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah.
So supply and demand economics, fairly simple. The greater the demand and the lower supply means fees would go up and down, fluctuate based on that. So there's a current debate in the industry. This has probably been going on for a year or so. What is there a pharmacy shortage? Is it there's loads of demand, but there's a pharmacy shortage? Is there less people getting moved registered? Is there more people moving out of pharmacy? Well, lots of things feed into this supply and demand economics, and little bits of all those things that I've mentioned all feed in. And as well as that, throughout the UK, each area has its own supply and demand economics. So again, I just talked about the Isle of Wight or the Isle of Skye, and the reason the Isle of Skye puts high rates on our locum platform is because we're short a small number of pharmacists. I wouldn't say no, but there's a small number of pharmacists in the Isle of Skye. So means there's huge demand to bring pharmacists there. So if you analyze workforce data, it ultimately lets you match these things better. So outlying regions of London, there would be a less supply of pharmacists, but a great demand for shifts. But in London, there's lots of pharmacists because it's a densely populated area. So the supply and demand is kind of matched, whereas outside it's not. So if you can match these, it leads to better patient outcomes because people will be served and there'll be less store closures. So in turn, there will be better patient outcomes by understanding that data. So that's kind of a high level on supply and demand.
It's interesting,
sorry,
even the regional and seasonal demands, even how it fluctuates throughout the year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's regional, there's seasonal, there's there's many different aspects. So supply and demand is actually impacted by weather. So if there's an area that's got like heavy snowfall, people won't travel to outside their area. So that means the supply and demand has a knock-on effect in different areas around that. So we've seen it looking at our platform. There's COVID was a good example too. Outside external pressures put an impact on supply and demand because there was COVID vaccination centres opened, which increased the demand for pharmacists serving those vaccinations. But they also had all the same duties as normal. So the demand for pharmacists was high, which again increased the rate because there was high demand and the same supply because it wasn't changing. So that is interesting, and we look at this quite a lot. And then I mentioned companies like Uber previously. This will be some splendid demand economics will be something that they look at a lot as well, and other kind of gig economy businesses and marketplaces will look at this a lot to inform decisions internally. Okay, speaking of data, there's data that we use internally to understand what's going on in the market. So we're kind of seeing demand for pharmacists at a high recently. And then again, this demand, as I've just nodded to, impacts locum rates. So we looked at our study. Our latest study goes from April 22 to April 23, our rate study. And what we do is we analyse all the shifts posted and booked and worked on the LAL platform. So that's around 200,000 locum pharmacist shifts in the 1st of April 22 and 23, as said. We then break this data down by region and city. And that gives us an understanding of the market rates. We're also in the fortunate position where we can compare that data back to previous years or previous quarters to get an idea of the changes and the fluctuations within market rate by region and by city. So this beautiful slide here is pulled from a report we created with Christie's & Co. So it's straight from there, which you can access online, and then we could share with anyone who would like it after the webinar. But what you can see here is this is the average rate by region on the right-hand side. So England, you can see 37.14 is the average rate from April to April. April 22 to April 23, and that was an increase by 0.3% on the previous period. We then see Scotland is notoriously, again, supply and demand economics, notoriously higher rates, so 45.36, and that was just over a 2% increase in the previous year. You see Wales, again, big rise for Wales, 42.60. And that is a 7% increase on the previous period. And then Northern Ireland, again, cost of living is lower. There's other supply and demand economics feeding in here, but there's 28.66 was the average rate paid between April 22 and 23. And that actually was a 17% rise. And overall, the UK average was 38.44, which represented a 4.1% rise. I think the one key thing to pull out here is Wales grew at a record rate, and we've seen there's different pressures within different regions, and this is again feeds supply and demand economics. You can see they're not all the same rate of growth. So yes, we hopefully that gives a high level view, and we can dive into the cities at a glance. This is very small. Hopefully you can see this on your screen. Like I say, we can share this post the webinar. But Tom, is there anything that jumps out to you on that?
It's just all how so many rises there have been, especially in these smaller places, as you say, in supply and demand.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's there's lots of interesting information here for people to delve into.
Yeah, I think this is one that's better consumed by not on a webinar, just because there's so much information, and there's no point me reeling through figures here and different percentages. But it's just, I find it extremely interesting. You know, right up in the north of the UK and Inverness, and right down at the south in Exeter, they see similar patterns. So yeah, that's something to note. And again, you might think it's because there's supply and demand, but there's other factors that feed into it. We've done analysis before, and I think places with no pharmacy schools, regions in the UK with no pharmacy schools, or cities in the UK with no pharmacy schools, actually had a higher rate, on average, because what happened there was that when people graduated from those pharmacy schools in certain cities, they generally stayed there, or they didn't migrate as often. So whenever you have no pharmacy school, there's a higher demand for pharmacists and a lack of supply. So again, that feeds the supply and demand economics, which is a really interesting concept. And there's, like I said before, there's various other factors that feed into it. That's not the only one. So yeah, that's one thing that to look at. And I mean, if you look at this in the future and you have some questions, please do reach out to us. We love being as collaborative as possible with employers and locums. So we're happy to answer any questions on this and the collation of the data and methodology and things. So please do reach out. And if you actually want one of these studies, we can send a link to the digital copy out. You just put comment your name underneath, or comment yes please underneath the comments under this webinar, and we will get that out as soon as possible. Okay, so kind of delved into this discussion points again, conscious of time, but there's a couple of things here. Well, community pharmacies are definitely under pressure. There's funding issues and support from the NHS. Also, there's a demand to provide more services, which again is going to increase workforce challenges. And we've seen an increase in negotiations between pharmacies and locum pharmacists. And I think this is kind of natural within a free market. So people can negotiate for shifts, if the pharmacy allow that. And it is really up to the pharmacy to negotiate a shift at a rate that they think is suitable for that shift. And again, we would encourage using data, the market data, supply and demand economics, analyze what your current locums are being paid or your direct locums are being paid, and then make a decision based on that. So, and again, there's factors that impact rate that are external from the person. So how quickly that shift is posted. So emergency shifts will go for a higher rate because they're emergency. And there's a few other things, but we can share that again post the webinar. So again, conscious of time, conclusion of analysing data within your pharmacy, it can be beneficial for any business. So if a business isn't analysing data, they should be. Put it as bluntly as that. The UK has specific supply and demand economics, and we believe that using data in pharmacies, especially the data that we've highlighted there, the different case studies, can not only lead to better outcomes in your pharmacy in terms of profitability, but it can just lead to a better workforce experience plus locum experience plus patient experience, because they all have a knock-on impact. So we haven't even really got into how you can use data to impact your patient service, which is a whole other webinar, which we might do in the future. But hopefully that was interesting and we didn't go through it at too fast of a pace. Tom, is there anything you want to add before we kind of open up to a couple of questions?
No, we've had quite a few questions through, so I think if we'll move on to them, try and get as many answers as we can. But like you're saying, data is so so important. Like most modern systems will provide reporting data and data suites in there. So just delve into what you need, and if you need extra, come speak to us.
Perfect. Do you want to jump? Do you want to just ask me the questions and we can decide who answers? Hopefully, there's nothing
Of
too
course.
difficult.
So so we have quite a few here, so I'm going to try and get through as many as we can. But if we don't, obviously we'll pick up with you afterwards. So we've got one from Emma. So how can we use data to make us a more attractive place to work and then attract more locums?
Yeah, I suppose this is kind of a little bit on what we touched on previously. I can understand why this question's been asked. There's recruitment challenges around finding permanent pharmacists. So I think the main thing is survey, do quantitative and qualitative research. So survey your current employees. What do they love about the pharmacy that you own or you work in, and then pull that information that they give you out into your job ads and make those the headlines. So even from a marketing, Tom and I are marketeers, so always leaning back to the marketing point of view. But even from a marketing point of view, when you have a job ad, there's a thing called a value proposition. So what is the value, the biggest value that would attract people to work in your pharmacy? And if a staff member says it is friendly, warm team in a really an innovative environment, then bring that out. Make that the headline. Come work with a friend, warm team in an innovative environment. That should be the headline, and everything else should fall under that. And that's kind of what I would say on that. It might not be quantitative data, but it's definitely qualitative and things you can pull out to really impact your recruitment drive.
Yeah, it's identifying those top benefits and really shouting about them.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what your features in a way, but the benefits people really appreciate about you. I've got one from Mittel. So how can we use the data to identify staffing shortages in advance so we can cover any gaps?
Yeah, there's a couple of ways. This is a good one. There's a couple of ways you can do this. So if a follow-up question would be, do you use a digital rota or digital schedule? If not, then you should, because this will help you analyze gaps. For example, we have a product, an in-house product. It's a rota, and what that rota is, it's sort of split by job role. So if a pharmacist is unavailable for a shift way in advance, could be way in advance. Your permanent pharmacist could book in a holiday request way in advance, say 6 weeks in advance. What that'll do is that'll alert you that there's a gap in the rota, and this is the skill set that you need to fill that gap. So although it's not data in terms of big data, it's data as in you're recording information and it's pulling something out that you need to have an outcome for, an action for. So I would say if you don't have a digital rota, get a digital rota. You should also sort of analyze historical data and see when the times where you're likely to need a pharmacist. So summer holidays, people always need to go on holiday in terms of permanent staff. So, forecast that out in advance and bring in internal policies to make sure your permanent staff book holidays 6 months in advance, or 3 months in advance. 6 months might be a bit much, so 3 months in advance, to allow you to get a shift posted, not at an emergency rate, and to give you plenty of time to fill it. So hopefully that answers it in some way or another.
Yeah. Got one from Paige. So for pharmacy managers, what types of data should we collect and analyze to better understand our workforce, please?
Wow. Well, there's no shortage of data that you could collect. Better understand your workforce. I suppose that's quite broad. I would say, firstly, understand how busy your pharmacy is. How many items do you dispense? You'll have access to that data, but that can help you make informed decisions on staffing, especially staffing challenges. Like if you've got a small number of pharmacists in and dispensers and technicians in, but you're dispensing a lot of prescriptions, you might need support from a locum, or if you're providing services you might need support from a locum or support from another permanent member of staff. So I would analyse how busy your pharmacy is and looking at that broadly, like how many items do you dispense, and also how many services, private services or other services do you provide. And then what impact does that have against the bottom line of your business in terms of services you provide and items dispensed? What impact does that have, and do you have space there to ease workplace pressures by bringing in a locum to help? So hopefully that answers the question. And again, if not, happy to do a follow-up. I'll put you in touch with one of our team who can dive into that in even more detail.
Perfect. Just looking at the time, probably got time for one more. So we've got one from Paresh.
Okay.
So in what ways does real-time data what ways does real-time data contribute to better decision-making to help us fill locum shifts?
Yeah, well, live is the best from data. So real time will be live data that you can look at. It's constantly fluctuating and changing. Again, the rates data is probably the best example of this. So whenever someone books a shift on our platform, it informs the platform which impacts the market rate. So market rate data, probably the best example of this. So I would suggest you using that to inform decision making. So it could be that you're posting a shift for next week. Next week is half term for schools. So what that means is you look at the market rate data for next week in your area, and it'll be higher. So you need to pay a better rate than you usually would in order to attract the locum and ensure you have a good shift fill rate. So that's how live data can kind of work, because this week won't be the same as next week, if that makes sense, based on term holidays and things like that, because more permanent pharmacists are taking time off. So things like that. So that's the best use case of live data, I would say.
Amazing. Yeah, we have quite a few more questions, but I think we'll have to pick up with them afterwards, just looking at the time.
Okay, perfect. That was really good. Thank you very much, everyone, for your input. It's always good when this gets collaborative and you get some questions. Like I said before, if you want the market rate report, the Christie's market rate report, just put your name or yes, please underneath in the comments, and we will get that sent out to you. But lastly, just like to say thanks for joining us. Know how busy everyone is in the pharmacy industry, and it's really complimentary that so many people were joining us tonight, and hopefully you found what we've talked about really interesting.
Yeah, I know I did.
Brilliant, Tom. Well, that's the main thing.
Yeah, as long as I'm happy.
Yeah. Without further ado, then, guys, thanks very much, and we'll end the broadcast now. So thank you. Have a good evening.
Have a great
Bye.
evening. Bye. Bye.